What if just a few days could completely transform the way you approach street photography? That's exactly what happened to me during a recent trip to Istanbul. The energy, the culture, and the other photographers I met there all pushed me to see the streets in a whole new light. In this video, I'm sharing the 9 lessons I learned, lessons that will hopefully help you break out of your routine and capture more compelling, dynamic images. Stick around because these tips could completely change the way that you shoot. So let's get right into it. Curiosity is what being a great street photographer is all about, in my opinion. If you're not curious about the world, then how can you possibly capture compelling frames of life in it? On my recent trip, after meeting up with Eduardo Ortiz, curiosity led me into the local tea shops of Istanbul, where tourists usually don't go to very much, which is where I took some images that I'm really happy with. It was curiosity that was the biggest driver to explore somewhere different to the usual tourist hotspots. So how can you be more curious and use that to your advantage in your street photography? Well, try to cultivate a habit of looking beyond what's obvious. Don't rush through your environment, slow down and observe your surroundings really well, and ask yourself what stories could unfold that you might want to capture with your camera. Be willing to explore areas that don't initially seem very interesting, and you'll find hidden gems for sure. While I was walking through Istanbul's alleys in a non-touristy part of town, I was starting to get kind of worried about how people would react to my camera. But as I was with Eduardo, I watched how he moved through the crowd with confidence, openly framing his shots without hesitation, and his boldness really inspired me. Later in the afternoon, I noticed a really tender moment of a couple kissing, and rather than sort of lose the nerve to capture the moment, I raised the camera to my eye and clicked the shutter. If we want to document the world around us and capture human moments, then often we need to really be bold and just go for it, or else the moment will be lost forever. Confidence makes all the difference in street photography, but it's also one of the hardest things to get good at, especially as a beginner. This deserves a whole video on its own, but I always encourage people when they're out photographing in a public space to really try not to hide what they're doing or sneak shots. Instead, be bold, use your viewfinder and smile. Often your body language will communicate your intentions, and people will either be completely indifferent to what you're doing, or in some cases they might even be really happy to have their photograph taken. You're actually way less likely to be noticed if you don't try to hide what you're doing, which leads us nicely into the next tip. While I was walking along with Eduardo, we came across a group of people playing cards outside a tea shop. I loved the colours of the tablecloth and the dynamism of the locals going about their leisure time. My first instinct was to snap a candid shot and move on, but on the suggestion of Eduardo, I approached the group and we kind of asked if we could take a few photos. They were more than happy for us to take a few shots, and it gave me more time to find the angle I wanted, rather than just snap a candid quickly and move on. The resulting image was far more intimate than any candid I could have taken, and it was also a really fun interaction, which is what makes travelling and street photography so enjoyable. Sometimes we can get really wrapped up in the notion that street photography has to be candid, or it doesn't count as real street photography, and that's just total rubbish in my opinion. Sometimes actually, if you make your presence known, people relax around you, they don't feel any threat, and they carry on about their business anyway, allowing you to get closer and make better photos. Don't hesitate to engage with your subjects. A brief conversation or even a simple smile can turn a stiff moment into a meaningful one. Street photography doesn't always have to be about the candid, unnoticed shot. Sometimes the most powerful images come from the connection between photographer and subject. Take the time to talk to people. It adds a human layer to your work and might just make your photo walks a little bit more enjoyable. About 1,000,000 years ago, I studied graphic design at the university, and I've always had an eye for colour and bold graphic shapes. But in my photography recently, I've realised that often I'm far too rigid with my composition. I was always trying to frame the scene perfectly, with the horizon exactly straight and my subject centred. And this approach felt way too static for a city with so much energy and chaos as Istanbul. So I started playing around with perspective. One afternoon while watching kids chase pigeons, I decided to crouch really low and tilt my camera slightly. Suddenly the scene felt alive. The movement of the kids and the birds became more dynamic, and was more like what I saw with my eye at the time. So what are some practical ways to be less rigid with your compositions? Well, for starters, I'd say to turn off your camera guidelines and break the rules of composition a bit. Tilt your camera, shoot from above or below, or even shoot while you're moving about. Use the environment to inspire you. This doesn't mean abandoning good compositional technique, but rather allowing flexibility to capture the energy and spontaneity of a scene. Try shooting from unconventional angles and notice how it changes the mood of your images. Istanbul's famous Galata Bridge is always alive with people, and capturing the right moment in such a busy environment can be a little bit overwhelming. After observing for a while though, I began to notice groups of people at the railings pointing out the wonderful sunset, and I started predicting where the next interesting moment might happen. Soon enough, I was in the right place at the right time, photographing a woman pointing out directly to where the sun was going down. Is it a mind-blowing photo? No, but it conveys the mood and warmth of the evening, and just waiting a little bit for that right moment, anticipating a pointing finger, just made sure that I added a little bit more interest to the image than only the back of their heads. So is it actually possible to predict the future on the street? Well, obviously no, it's not. If I could predict the future, then I probably wouldn't be sitting by myself talking to a camera, I'd be in Barbados. So no, you can't predict the future, but with enough time and practice, you can learn to anticipate what's going to happen. The more time you spend watching people and their interactions, the more used you get to predicting human behaviour, which will often lead to more exciting shots down the line. On the Asian side of Istanbul in the late afternoon, the light was just perfect. I noticed these two kids were diving into the water and I knew it was a great opportunity for a shot. I snapped off an image, but something felt a little bit incomplete, so I stayed and watched the scene unfold. I changed my angle, waited for other elements to come into play, and kept shooting. Eventually I captured an image where the kids weren't diving at all, but were in the water, framed by a family watching them on the water's edge. And in my opinion, it's a striking image that I really enjoy. The final image was much stronger than my first instinctive shot. So how can we be sure to work the scene properly? Well, firstly, don't leave a scene too quickly. Often your first shot is just the beginning. Work the scene by changing your perspective, wait for new subjects, or adjust your settings on your camera. Spend time in one spot and you'll start noticing details you would have missed otherwise. Take multiple shots from different angles and don't settle until you feel you've truly captured the essence of the scene. In Istanbul, I decided to push myself beyond my usual habits, so I set myself a personal challenge. I wanted to break away from trying to capture moments all the time and instead focused on more abstract scenes to give a different flavour to my day, but also to the images I was making. So the challenge I set myself was trying to capture the city's essence through reflections, and I found beauty in glass windows and shop displays throughout the day. While I used to make a lot of abstract work back in the day and I moved away from it, it's great to bring that back into my photography a bit to rediscover other aspects of what street photography can be. This self-imposed challenge pushed me to see Istanbul in a new way, which is really exciting. In my opinion, if you regularly set yourself creative challenges, it keeps your photography walks exciting and fresh, and then it ensures you're always practicing new skills. Maybe pick a specific theme, restrict your gear, or give yourself a time limit. These self-assignments force you to think differently, breaking out of your comfort zone and encouraging creativity. For example, challenge yourself to shoot only from low angles for the day maybe, or spend a whole day focusing on capturing reflections or textures. Constraints like this often lead to surprising results. One evening on the ferry crossing the Bosphorus, I found myself absolutely mesmerised by how the golden hour light filtered through the windows. The warm glow of the setting sun shone across the ferry, illuminating people's faces and creating long, dramatic shadows. It hit me then that light is so important. Great light can give you so many opportunities to experiment with colour, feeling and mood. While I'm a firm believer that you can absolutely capture amazing street photographs in any light, it can really pay off to spend time learning to study light as much as you study your surroundings. Pay attention to how natural light changes throughout the day and how artificial lights can transform the atmosphere at night. Experimenting with shooting at different times, during the early morning, the midday and late afternoon, to really understand how light impacts the mood and texture of images can be a really powerful way to improve your street photography. Watching for shadows and reflections to add dimension to compositions and really paying attention to light without using it as the main subject of an image can really give a new dimension to your work. Even if you find yourself in an incredible place like Istanbul, Indonesia or Italy, you're not guaranteed to get award-winning images at all. Truly great street photographs are so rare to capture, which can often make us feel like we're not good enough and that we fail all the time. I took so many terrible photographs on this trip. Out of focus images, poorly lit ones, bad compositions, and I really missed some great moments. Not just because I was working on film, which can be quite tricky to work with, but also due to my complete own incompetence. But that's all part of it. Sometimes when you mess something up though, like maybe the wrong lighting, the wrong settings or the wrong composition, it can actually result in a happy accident, where the image actually works anyway with the imperfections making it more unique and exciting. We should all learn from our failures, and that's what makes us better photographers and observers of the world. The most important thing is to enjoy the process rather than focus too much on the results. I actually realised the importance in a lot of these points in this video when I met the excellent photographer Eduardo Ortiz. So if you want to see him in action, don't miss this video next where we follow along with him for a day of exciting street photography in Istanbul. As always, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.